Diana Montford, the world's first transgender television journalist. My guest is Ms. Melissa Sklarz, transgender activist and transgender politician. And we are going to read a list of the trans folk, both men and women, who were murdered during 2016. It is called, what is it called?
It's called the Transgender Day of Remembrance. It happens every year on November 20th. It was started in 1999 by Gwendolyn Ann Smith in Massachusetts to honor the memory of Rita Hester, who was brutally murdered in Allston, Massachusetts. It's held every year. It started very small, it was very local, and now it is international. It's an opportunity for transgender people to honor the memories of those that have been victims of violence around the world.
And that is so many trans people. Anyway, do you have any idea why it is that trans people are more often murdered than many other groups?
If we take a look at this list, we'll notice many of them are trans women of color. And what happens when in a culture that's really not only transphobic, it's also racist. And so the opportunities to get validated as women are fewer. And trans women of color end up in more risky situations in an effort to validate themselves as women. You know, when you and I might date, there's certainly going to be some care taken.
Yes, but since everyone knows who we are, stealth is not an option.
But once upon a time, we were both young, and
yes.
You were young and I was younger. So, and so these are people, if we take a look at this list, only one is over 40, only one other is over 35. These are mostly young people. Probably they've known the person. Probably this is something to do with dating. It happens every year. Every year there are more and more names on the list. I don't know if the culture is becoming more violent towards transgender women or if it's just the opportunity to get more reporting is better. Most of these people are having problems with family, problems in the neighborhood, problems with work, and even when these terrible things happen to them, the newspaper and the police still misgender them, that is, by calling them by a dead birth identity that no longer exists, and so they get humiliated in death. And so it's hard for us to sit here as empowered people to try to fit into their lives and into their clothing, and at least to take this moment in this time of Trans Day of Remembrance to honor their lives.
I should mention that we are filming this on November 10th, 2 days after the presidential election. And you know who won. Donald Trump won. So, and he is not known for his transgender acceptance. Although we don't know. But we worry for the future of the LGBTQ community. We will see what happens, right?
Here, a man is now elected our national leader. He has no public record. He has speeches, and he has a running mate, Mike Pence, who is probably one of the most homophobic politicians in America. How will Donald Trump act once he becomes the president of the United States? Nobody knows. He's a lifelong New Yorker. He was born and raised in Queens. He knows everything that everyone else knows from New York. He's 70 years old. None of this is new. He's been hot and cold towards trans people, towards LGBT people. What we're looking at is a blank slate. We know absolutely nothing about him. He has no public record. He's a guy from reality television, and now he's going to be the leader of the free world.
Which means that you should always be very careful to have a becoming hairstyle when you're on television, because you never know where it might lead. I'm not really that dumb. But anyway, I ain't so dumb. I've been on 26 years. Even Donnie Dark, a.k.a. Trump, can't say that. But many of our people have been murdered, as we just said. Many, let's hope it's not our country that's just been murdered and we don't know it. And many of these trans people, both men and women, are people of color, and that is wrong. No one should be murdered, but all lives matter. It's not just a case of black lives or trans lives or white lives. It is all lives.
But every day in America, we all know that white lives matter. That's never in question. White people hold a great deal of the money, of the power, and the authority.
Yes, but let me ask you this. White lives may matter, but do white trans lives matter?
White trans lives matter because whatever victories transgender people seem to acquire in the struggle, white people seem to get most of the benefits, and trans women of color end up on these victim lists, on these murder lists, so that white identified people like you and me get to read them on the air.
In other words, you're saying that we white trans people have an easier time of it and fewer of us are murdered than people of color.
In civil rights struggles, when victories are acquired, white people get the victories, and people of color still struggle because whatever their gender identity or sexual orientation, in the end, they are still black people, they are still people of color in a culture that is institutionally racist.
On that cheerful note, let's read the list of the dead, shall we? Do you want to go first?
So I will read the first half, and then you could read the second half. It's a list of 25 names.
I thought we'd alternate. One name me, one name you.
As I said, we will alternate. One name me and then one name you. Again, it's hard to determine exactly what has happened here. All of this is secondhand information, but we're going to assume that all these people deserve to be honored in their memory.
The point is, we're not sure if some of these people were murdered or committed suicide or death by misadventure, whatever.
Probably 2 gunshots in the back is a doubtful suicide.
Yes.
So we will start. So the first name on our list is Monica Loera from Austin, Texas, January 22nd.
Do we know how Monica died?
I do not. I have my phone. We can research it.
Second on the list is Jasmine Sierra from Bakersfield, California, also January 22nd.
3, Caden Clark from Mesa, Arizona, on February 4th.
4, Maya Young from Philadelphia, February 20th.
Next is DeMarcus Stansberry, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, on February 27th.
A strange death, a suspicious death, which we're not sure if it's murder or if it's accident or what, perhaps suicide, is the suspicious death of Veronica Cano, who died in San Antonio on February 20th.
Next is Candace Johnson in Burlington, Iowa, March 2nd.
Next is Courtney Davis Dawson, Yoakum, Courtney Davis Dawson Yoakum, who died in Los Angeles, March 22nd.
Kiona Monroe Blackney, Rockville, Maryland, April 16th.
Let me see. Reese Walker, Wichita, Kansas, May 1st.
Mercedes Successful, Haines City, Florida, May 15th.
Amos Bede, or BD, of Burlington, Vermont. It doesn't say what day he died, but it does say that he or she was 38 years old.
Goddess Diamond, New Orleans, Louisiana, 20 years old.
D.D. Dodds, Washington, D.C., 22 years old.
Dee Wiggum, Biloxi, Mississippi, 25 years old.
Sky Maccabee, Cleveland, Ohio, July 30th, 26 years old.
Erica Tayarena, El Paso, Texas, 36 years old, August 8th.
Ray Lynn Thomas, Columbus, probably Columbus, Ohio, died on August 10th at the age of 28 years.
Titi Sephore, Chicago, September 11th, 26 or 27 years old.
Lexi Stronin, I think that's it, isn't it? Stronin or this one?
Yes, that's it.
Yes, Lexi Stronin died in Maine on September 6th at the age of 43.
Crystal Edmonds, Baltimore, Maryland, September 16th, 32 years old.
Jazz Alford, Birmingham, September 23rd, 30 years old.
Brandy Bledsoe, Cleveland, Ohio, October 8th, 32 years old.
Noonie Norwood, Richmond, November 6th, 30 years old.
And that was last week. And so that's a list of 25. These lists grow year by year.
It was 24 last year, wasn't it?
I don't know.
I think.
If you take a look at South America, probably more trans women in Brazil face violence all the time. The numbers there are horrific.
Probably 25 of every 3 hours or something, you know. But yes, and these are the people we know about, the people who made the news, the people the police chose to report on. There are many more trans people, both trans men and trans women, who sadly are murdered and simply seem to have disappeared, or people say, oh, well, it was an accident or something, you know. But to return to, why is it that the straight hegemony, the cisgender hegemony, has such hatred for trans folk?
Yeah, I don't know the circumstances involved. You know, this list to me, sitting here in New York City, are people that I don't know. I don't know their circumstances. You know, whether these are loved ones, whether these are strangers, whether it's dating, whether it's poor people in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't know. Were they outed as trans before, or did something happen and this person panicked? You know, with 25 different names, there are potentially 25 different circumstances.
Let me ask you, you said poor people. Would poverty make it easier for someone to be murdered?
You know, when I transitioned, what was important to me was stability. You know, I took door number 2, stability. I wasn't really interested in all the glamour and excitement. I looked for love early on, but mostly I wanted a life that was stable and safe, and I've been able to achieve that. You know, all these people, many are under 30, you know, it's that validation of being women, and if someone needs to be validated, who
By
knows
that
what
you
kinds
mean that they try to
risks.
pass as women with men who have no idea these ladies might be transgender, and when they find out,
if you meet a man and he tells you you're the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, and you're
tell him to get his eyes checked. No,
you're not going to turn your back on him. You want to hear
unless
more.
he wants you to.
And again, I don't know the circumstances here. We could pick any one of these. We could do an in-depth story and study and figure out how these people ended up on this list and desk on
Girls,
your TV
I
show.
did go for the glamour. You may have gone for I went for the glamour, and I got stability into the bargain. If a man tells you, you're the most gorgeous woman I've ever seen, they'll say that. Come on, they want to get laid. Let's be frank here. You're the most gorgeous woman I've ever seen. You're beautiful. You're sexy. You're blah, 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 blah. Or, oh, I'll take care of you. I'll buy you this. I'll buy you that. Lines we've all heard a gazillion times. Make sure you tell him, I am transgender. What does that mean? It means that I was born male and I am now female. Oh, you mean you got like a cock or something? That's what I mean. And then if they're into it, that's good. If they're not into it, that's fine too. And if they start screaming at you, hey, you fucking faggot, you're a guy, hey, that's a guy, just let it go. Just walk away. Don't think, oh, I can't be a coward and walk away. Walk away and live to laugh another day.
So here in New York City, we had the tragic case of Elon Nettles, who was with a friend, and there were guys out in front of a bar, and they were drinking, and they recognized her from the neighborhood, and they started yelling at her, and they kept yelling at her.
Excuse me, they recognized her as a former male, because they knew her as a male.
She was a kid from the neighborhood who had transitioned, who still lived with her family, and they were outside of a bar, and they got agitated, and they started going after them, and they ended up beating her, and they ended up beating her to death. And that's here in Harlem, and it was a terrible story. She was very young, and she was not looking for trouble. She didn't want any trouble. She was newly transitioned, And terrible things happen to trans women in poor neighborhoods, especially if they're trans women of color.
Well, that's what I was asking. Is poverty a kind of incitement to violence? And if trans people happen to be handy, I would imagine the frustration of poverty and institutionalized racism would make straight men, cisgender men, very angry because, you know, they don't have a place at the table. And then they see someone even weaker. Is that possible?
What makes this list so difficult is that transgender people are a small part of our population, and yet these lists of those that die violently seem to never get smaller, they only get larger.
Isn't it also possible that because trans people are kept from gainful employment as a rule, not always, but sometimes, and have to be sex workers, and sex workers, whether cisgender or transgender or male or female, are always subject to more violence than the general population? That too might contribute to their deaths.
I think our culture is changing. You and I can remember what it was like in the old days, and today there is community empowerment. We've had eight years of cultural change and political change.
Meaning President Obama.
And so what happens now, we're seeing trans people coming out younger and younger and younger, coming out as young as 5 and 6.
And 3.
And 3. And so the idea that they don't have to suffer through those teenage years, and there's a place for them. And so, I don't know the circumstances. I don't know any of these. What we can do on your next show that you and I are together, we can pick one at random and find out exactly who they are, rather than being a name in the list of their circumstances and how they ended up on this terrible list.
Yes, but just being on a list when you're transgender, living in poverty, and marginalized because of a lot of things, poverty, transgender, you name it. Just having a list with somebody saying, what happened? You're dead, and here's your name. And now it's part of the historical record. And now we know who you were to a point. We know you lived, and we know you met a violent end. Just that is a vast improvement over what it was 45 years ago when I transitioned, and I'm sure even the cops killed people then, trans people, for sport.
Because of people like you, Diana Montford, your visibility has been part of change of our culture.
And yours.
And mine.
Yours.
So, there are people that never met a transgender person before, and then they had Caitlyn.
That they know of.
That they know. That they had Caitlyn Jenner on television. Of course, Caitlyn Jenner is 40, 50 years after the fact. There have been transgender women in New York City probably going back to the 50s and 60s.
Sure, absolutely. And I knew some of them, and they were very nice, and they were wonderful.
And visibility makes it possible for all types of trans people, gender nonconforming people, to have lives that have meaning and have value. And that's why these lists are so sad, because rather than getting smaller as trans people become part of our culture, in fact, they get larger.
But we live in a more violent culture these days than we did 50 years ago. So
crime is down in New York.
Yes, that's what they
murders
say.
are down in New
I'm
York.
sure they
Gun
are.
ownership is down in
And
New
now
York.
let's talk
Violent
about the
crime.
Easter Bunny. I'm sure crime is down. They say that every single year. You can see 5 people shot right in front of you, and they say, but it wasn't 6. Crime is down. Come on. That's the standard statistic and has been for 25 years. They're always saying, crime is down. But anyway, I don't know. It's just crummy, isn't it, that life sucks so much, that people get killed and suffer and hurt, and how come,
What's crummy, that community empowerment for transgender people is great for those of us that are white identified, and yet trans women of color still struggle to grow out of these marginalized lives.
But people of color in general struggle to break out of a kind of ghettoized prison they've been put into. I mean, many people do, Obama being a prime example, but many people do not because they are not allowed to. Because they do not get good schools, they do not have enough food to eat, their housing is substandard to the maximum it can be and still be called a dwelling. And then they are thrust into the prison industrial complex at the age of 16. And this is like Jim Crow lives, you know? I mean, this is slavery all over again. So, I mean, we cannot be surprised that people of color, suffer so, because it's institutionalized, apparently, for some odd reason. The powers that be want people of color to suffer. Why?
So race and class affect all people, whether they're transgender or not.
Why were you smiling earlier? That bothered me.
Because you questioning here on your TV show why there's institutionalized racism.
Yes.
Probably all those years of slavery probably had something to do with that. It's funny how white people consider people of color to be lazy ever since they stopped working for free as slaves.
Well, they're working for free now in the prisons.
I think that that institutional racism affects us all, whether we live in cities or not, whether we're trans or not, whether we're LGBT or not.
And let's not forget, you and I are not, strictly speaking, white. You're Jewish, I'm Spanish. So there are degrees of whiteness. If we were English, boy, would we be white. But we're not English, you know? I am part Scottish, though. But still, Scottish is bad. No, you have to be English.
And so we
know what it's like to a degree.
I won't speak on for you, but I was certainly, my white skin gave me privilege, gave me opportunities, and that
my white skin gave me sunburn, but okay.
And so even though that I've transitioned, even though I've had a long history of substance abuse, I can sit here with you today. I have a career, I have a home, and I've been able to, whatever difficulties, and a lot of that is because of racism that holds some people back, allows me to have privilege as a white person.
Well, was your substance abuse because you were trans and you didn't like yourself? Or were you escaping the fact that you were trans? Because I never abused substances, except when I'm emceeing a political thing. No, I'm kidding. I never abused substances. I've always had some kind of career, and I've always had a home. So why was that like internalized transphobia on your part?
I guess, substance abuse is complicated. We can do substance abuse in the LGBT community.
We do that in the ladies' room all the time. Let's hear it for substance abuse. Yeah. No, I'm kidding. It's a joke. Anyway, a not funny joke. And I should be serious. My God, we're reading about dead people. Why am I laughing? I'm not laughing at the dead people. I'm laughing at the human condition. If you don't laugh, you're going to cry, right?
Which is a great segue into this election that we've had recently.
I called her and I was crying because Trump had won. I was hysterical with grief and sadness.
The analysis of what happened and why it happened and where do we go from here is only beginning. And certainly your viewers have their opinion and their point of view. But here we are just a few days after this election. It's still painful. It's unfortunate, and the future is going to be so dramatically different from what we've seen in the last 8 years.
For us LGBTQ folk?
And regular people and all of our friends and allies. America is going to change.
Are you saying we're going to have a change for the worse?
Oh, I am not a fortune teller. I am merely a guest on your television show. I wish that we would elect a leader that had some kind of a public record. The people have spoken, and even though he got less of the popular vote
than Hillary Clinton, do away with the Electoral College. It's a 1780s organization. We no longer need it, you were saying. Did I interrupt you? I always do. Yes.
But this year, I will be a Hillary Clinton elector up on December 19th in Albany. I will be one of New York's 29 electoral votes. I'll be thrilled and excited to vote for Hillary Clinton. In New York, we will all vote for Hillary Clinton.
Even though it's after the election?
Well, the election is not the popular vote. It's the Electoral College. And this year, Electoral College meets on December 19th in every state capital throughout the country. And here in New York, the 29 votes will all go to Hillary Clinton.
Thank God. Is it possible she might win?
I would say it's one chance out of 100 billion.
But this election has been so crazy, anything is possible.
I guess. Each campaign has picked their electors. If something magical happens where a portion of the Trump electors wake up and decide that America would be better served by Hillary Clinton as president, then I guess that would happen. That happens very rarely. It's called a faithless elector that does not follow the point of view of the party or the candidate that selected them. So it is possible. There is a rumor that there are 1 or 2 delegates in the state of Washington who will not be supporting Hillary Clinton this year. We will have to wait until December 19th to find out.
Yes. And anyway, look, if you are a transgender person of either sex or any sex, trans man, trans woman, don't get yourself killed, for God's sake, you know. I don't care what they offer you. I'll give you this, I'll give you that, or I'll take you here, I'll take you there, or you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, or I'm usually gay, but you're a trans man and that turns me on, that kind of thing. They'll say something, right? Con artists are good because you don't know they're con artists. The Black Dahlia didn't know that her murderer was going to murder her. You know, Sharon Tate opened the door. Well, actually, she didn't, but they stuck into her house. And you never know who's out to kill you, you know? I don't want to scare you, but you just don't. So be very careful and love yourself. And don't put yourself in dangerous situations if you can help it. If you have to make a living, be smart, keep your eyes open. If for any reason you feel uncomfortable with anyone, don't do it. No matter what that person is offering you, just don't do it. Just forget it.
You know, in the old days, being trans
we're almost out of time.
Was a singular journey.
I transitioned in 1971 at 15, I remember.
And now what we can do is create community, you know. So the most important thing to have this life is make friends, stay connected, be involved, you know, try to reconcile with family. If you cannot reconcile with your family of birth, then find a family of choice. Yes. And that will do wonders in providing a foundation of a life.
Well, just you and I have known each other for, what, 25, 30 years, something like that.
And we have done exactly that. We have created friendships and we've helped build a community here in New York.
Yes, we have. And you can do it wherever you are. My guest has been transgender activist and politician, Ms. Melissa Sklarz. I'm Diana Montford. This has been the Diana Montford Show. Even if no one else loves you, I love you and Melissa loves you. And if you can possibly get to New York, we have a thriving trans community here. So if it's dangerous where you are, if you can scrape together the bus money, come to New York and see what happens. You're going to be safer here than you are wherever, right?
Yes. Yes, you are.
Yes, you are. And you have friends and you have family here, and we're your family. So if your own family has said bye-bye, you say, that's fine with me. I got family in New York, see you, right?
Yes, New York has always been a beacon, has been for 50, 75, 100 years, and continues to be a beacon today.
Yes, we love you a lot. See you next time. Bye.
Okay.
Oh.